Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's May 28th. It's a Thursday. It's a tactical Thursday, so we'll be taking your tactical questions throughout the show. Use that hashtag on Twitter if you are so inclined. You can also ask questions on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere. You can also send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. If you want to send us a Facebook message, that's cool too. You can send us an Instagram message as well. I mean, you can send us a carrier pigeon if you want to as well, but we might not get that one till tomorrow. But we're taking your questions throughout the show, tactics, but also whatever you want to get into. There's a lot of news. There's a 8+ hour meeting scheduled for the Premier League today. It is ongoing. It's probably about halfway done, maybe, depending on what other issues come up. We'll get you caught up on what that meeting's about. We'll get you caught up on other leagues that have made some news, and we'll go from there. It's going to be a busy show, and John has a question of the day, which I'm afraid of.
Technically, there are two, but...
even better.
Well, it's because the second one popped into my head after I wrote the first one down.
Okay.
I'll go second one first. I didn't know about this Hawaii Chick-fil-A either that you and Mike talked about on Twitter yesterday.
You didn't know about well, first off, you know that Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, has his roots on the south side of town.
Yes.
You know that you have a lot of variant on the things that the Chick-fil-A empire has. You have the regular Chick-fil-A's. You have the Dwarf House, which has a little bit different menu. You have Truett's Grill, which has a little bit different menu. And then there is a pizza place in Fayetteville. I think it's still open. I'm not 100% sure.
Did not know about that.
I have not heard good things about that one, so I have not checked it out. And the Hawaiian one, I want to say it's opened in the last 10 years. I was trying to get the details on it because it's been a while since I've been there. It is in the Fayetteville area. True, it's a luau, which is appropriate.
Okay. Yes.
The menu is pretty good. I mean, we went a couple of times, and it's not bad. It's not bad. It's different. They do have some of the regular stuff as well, but they have some Hawaiian-themed Chick-fil-A menu.
Yeah, did not know this existed. So that was...
I mean, I'm really not surprised, John.
True. All right, now my second question has to do with tactics.
Okay.
And this is going upon your vast knowledge of the history of the game and the number of matches that you have watched ever since you were first attracted to the game. What is the weirdest formation or player positioning that actually worked that you've ever seen in a match?
I mean, nothing weird works for a whole match. Like, there's only so much you can do to be weird in a full match. I mean, when you're chasing a game or when you're defending a lead, like, yeah, you might have to get creative with things, but...
anything out of the blocks where a team sat there and they laid something out and you sat there and went, what? And then it actually worked.
No, because, I mean, I think what you're looking for, the way you're asking that, is like something that doesn't fit one of the base formations. And look, there's just not anything. I mean, I can't remember how Marcelo Bielsa has framed this. I think he says there's like 25 or 27 different ways that a team can line up. And most of those are variants on, 3 in the back and 3 up top or 2 up top. You could also do 3-6-1. Most of those are a variant on, if it's 4 in the back, is it 4 in the midfield? Is it 3 in the midfield? Is it 5 in the midfield? A 4-2-3-1 can be technically different than a 4-3-3, although it's really not. And then 5 in the back, and how that works, 5-4-1 or 5-3-2. I mean, there's only so many ways you can play. So you're asking shape in tactics, and there's just only so many ways you can do it. I think when you see a team late in a game play a 4-2-4 at this point, that's different and awkward because there's no balance in it.
Like Dallas did that one match against Atlanta United.
Well, yeah, but they didn't start that way because it's suicide. But you're chasing a game, you're down 2-1, so you do it. But even that, I mean, you're looking like a 4-2-4 in the attack, and then guys are dropping off once you're defending. You know, that's why shape is overrated, because teams can have a different shape going forward than they do defending. That's pretty typical. I mean, I guess the number one thing that comes to mind here is just the idea of late in a game when you've used all your subs and you're chasing a goal to throw the center back up top. Some managers still subscribe to that theory. You see it occasionally, not just on a set piece, but throw it basically as another center forward when you have no time to build up and you have to play direct and you have to play long and you need that center back to go up and win the ball and knock it on to a forward running through. It can work with some center backs. Others, it just doesn't make sense. So that's probably the weirdest thing that you'll see that can work. I mean, outside of that, the weirder you get, the less likely it's going to work.
Then what about an individual player who was out of his standard position and you're like, okay, that's an odd one, and then it actually ended up working?
I mean, it's got to be way out of their position, and again, they're typically not going to start that way because you'll play somebody else in that position. The way a game can go, sometimes you'll see. I can't remember the game specifically, but I remember John Harkes dropping into left back role. I think it was the Mexico qualifier where they drew at the Estadio Azteca, where Jeff Agus got a red card. And Harkes finished the game as an outside back, which is not that crazy, but not what was expected, not what was drawn up that day, and it was effective. Also center forwards, who are really center backs who have to go up there, that kind of thing. It's something that happens in a match sometimes where you see players have to move around and have to adjust, and that's really it. Like there's only so much you can do, because I don't consider like where we saw, for example, in Orlando in August of 2018 when Gressel played right back in a line of 4. That's not that weird, because he had played as a right wing back, he had played as a right winger, playing as a right back. It wasn't the best of those positions for him, but it wasn't this shocking thing. Probably with Atlanta United, the one that surprised me the most, because we just hadn't seen it, was Anton Walkes playing right back in 2017. Because we had seen him come on as a center back a couple of times. We knew he played in the holding midfield. We knew he had played on the outside a little bit, but it wasn't what he was really brought here for. So that was probably the biggest surprise that I remember at a game, was like, wow, okay. And then it worked. You can only take so many chances. I mean, usually when you're getting risky with a formation or risky with a player playing in a different position in a game, you're doing it out of desperation. It's not something you want to start a game with. It's not something you want to base your tactical plan on. That's desperate times. When you see Sergio Ramos up top for Spain or for Real Madrid, it's because they're desperate. He's not a center forward for a reason. But are there times where you have to do it? Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you want players who can adjust in a game, but you also don't want to put them too far out of that comfort zone, because then you don't get the best out of them.
Yeah, so that's when you were mentioning tactics. Like I said, that was the first thing that popped into my head this morning for the Tactics Thursday.
You've got to work on it. Like, that's the thing, is I think sometimes we have this impression that it's like a FIFA game where you can just, throw a shape out there and throw players into a position and, okay, they figure it out. No, you got to work on this stuff. Like, playing 3-4-3 like we've seen Atlanta United play this season is different than playing a 4-3-3, and you've got to work at it. You've got to work on the rotations, the transitions, the movement off the ball, the consistency, so you can play faster. If you're not comfortable in that shape or in your position, it's harder to play fast, because you have to get your head up, you have to look around, you have to see who's around you. The more you play in a shape and the more you work at it, the more you can do it on instinct. So getting crazy with tactics and positioning, you can only do that when you're desperate, because it's not something that's generally going to work.
Anybody else have any other questions? That's what we're here for. Tactics Thursday, go ahead and send them in. And Nathan Pugh this morning, and I know that Liverpool will be a part of our discussion as well. He says, chicken down here, he approves.
Yeah, I do recommend making a trip down to Truett's Luau. It is on, where was the address? I had it here. Lanier Avenue in Fayetteville. So go through the drive-thru, go get some Truett's Luau, and there you go.
Okay.
It's been open like 7 years, so that's
okay. Because that's the first I've heard of it. And I know once again that surprised the hell out of you.
Yeah, not really. Well, TikTok was very surprised too, so you weren't the only one here.
Yeah. Okay. So what's on your mind as you want to lead off? And when we get into the League One discussion, that will be where the topicality of what I'm wearing is come into play.
Let's set the scene for the Premier League discussions today. David Ornstein over at The Athletic did a great job of kind of laying things on the table for what's being talked about. And one of the things that's being talked about is Premier League clubs asking that relegation not be enforced if the season is stopped again because of imbalances in the fixture list. And it's a really valid argument. I mean, I don't think it should be enforced, period, right now. I think the season has changed. But if the Premier League doesn't finish the season, then you could have a team that comes back, and I can't remember which team was the example here, but they play 3 tough opponents, and season gets stopped, they don't finish it. They would have had 3 or 4 easy games after that when you look at strength of schedule. Oh, that's not fair to relegate them based on that because they didn't get to finish. So I think it's a valid ask. It doesn't sound like it's going to go through. You have to have 14 of the 20 teams vote for that, and I don't think the teams on the bottom end of the table are going to have the sway to pull that one off. What's going on now is figuring out scheduling, figuring out this rebate to broadcasters, figuring out what to do if you can't finish the season. All kinds of stuff. It's Ornstein tweeted just a little bit ago. He said, shows the importance of today's Premier League meeting and range of subjects needing to be discussed. Start date, fixture list, match venues, broadcast rebate, curtailment scenarios, etc. That all involved were advised to set aside 8 hours for it to be completed. Now, the big one is going to be that rebate. I think after getting the schedule lined up, it's going to be the rebate. Couple nuts and bolts before we get there. Teams are going to up their testing capacity by 10 each time. So now they're able to test 60 players and staff. That's as you start to ramp up. I'm assuming that's going to be a lot of staff that are in that new 10 that are going to be involved on match days and in these full contact training sessions. One thing on the training side. So this was an interesting element to it. It says the decision to allow full contact training came after a new tracking software looked at how many times a player came within 2 meters of one another over a course of a match. In more than 99% of the cases, it was less than the government threshold of 15 minutes in which you are more likely to contract the disease from an infected person, meaning football's been deemed low risk. You're not by the same person for 15 minutes in a match. So the question that's come up, and Didier Deschamps was the latest one to bring it up, about the substitutes sitting next to one another. Well, they're going to sit next to one another for more than 15 minutes. So if you have this as one of the guidelines, then that makes sense. I still think if you're doing all the testing, you can feel a little bit safer about that, but that is one of the guidelines, and that's one of the reasons why you have the Premier League coming back. This was in conjunction with the government and everything that goes along with that and their approvals. Medical experts have visited the clubs. You're going to see assurance officers go into all the clubs starting next week, actually starting today, to make sure guidelines are being followed. And then the one thing that's very different in England that I have not seen anywhere else is part of the scheduling discussion is going to include preseason games, essentially. It's going to include games in that week to 10 days before they start playing official matches, mostly at training grounds, all behind closed doors, obviously. But I'm guessing twofold. I mean, one, to help the teams prepare, but also to kind of run through the protocols a little bit. So Germany didn't do that. Spain hasn't talked about that. Nobody else has talked about having preseason games, essentially. The whole thing with this rebate Jamie Jackson and Paul McInnes over at The Guardian had a great piece about it. I highly recommend checking it out. Liverpool is leading a group of clubs that's going to argue against paying a £330 million rebate to Sky and other broadcasters. £330 million, what, $375 million, upwards close to $400 million?
Yeah, 1.3 is your marker.
Somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. That's going to be on the docket for today. The Premier League has recommended that should be accepted. A group of clubs led by Liverpool are going to argue against it. Now, here's the nuts and bolts. Because of the rights terms, 50% of the money is divided equally. So 50% of the TV's rights fees is divided equally among all the teams in the Premier League. 25% awarded for live appearances. So if you're on TV more, you're going to make more money. And the other 25% is the finishing position in the league. It's the prize money element of it. So the top 6 Premier League clubs would have to pay more back to the broadcasters, around £30 million each, compared to the approximate £10.75 million by the other 14 teams in the league, because of those appearances, because of the finishing position. Broadcasters have suggested staggering those payments of the rebate over 2 seasons to help clubs, which is a little surprising. I mean, we're talking $10.75 million by most of the league, £30 million by the top 6 teams, and the broadcasters are staggering that payback to help with teams that are being hit hard financially. That's not a huge amount, and maybe it's just the broadcasters being nice guys. I don't know. The rebates being sought because you haven't had games since mid-March. The broadcasters are arguing that the games are going to be behind closed doors. The value of the product will be devalued. It won't be as valuable as what they paid for. Liverpool and Tottenham and West Ham are part of this group as well. They're arguing against that. They're saying that because fans can't attend matches, it'll increase the premium on televised matches. Interest will be heightened. The temporary lifting of this 3 p.m. blackout on matches will help as well, and the value of the investment's actually more. Just a pretty valid argument, to be honest. It's. Yep. I don't know which way you're going to fall, but I get it. That makes a lot of sense. Here's the big issue, because there's always something behind the scenes on this. Look, David Cogan, who was the Premier League's chief media and rights advisor from 98 to 2015, was a big part of turning the Premier League into what it is. He's worried about the next round of TV rights because they're going to be negotiated this year. The last 3-year period, so up to 2022, which is the current contract, £9 billion have been generated by TV rights. Cogan says, what is the Premier League's capacity to earn another £9 to £10 billion over a 3-year period? He said, if the Premier League isn't going to bring in that money, where is the flexibility to find new cash? Ticket sales? Clubs are already costing their fans a fortune. Hospitality? He said it's already been priced to the max. So the only way that clubs can then survive is by looking at costs. And the massive costs are agents' fees and players. And at that point, you're affecting the level of the product, which is what the Premier League has always touted. He said this Saturday 3 p.m. idea, it's been, according to him, the holy grail of football rights selling for 50 years. Now, showing those games might open up that door for those games to be sold, which could mitigate some of the balance here. And he doesn't rule out that the FA would allow it. The FA hasn't allowed the Premier League to sell those games for TV. They've blacked it out because they don't want to hurt the attendances at smaller teams. Well, the smaller teams might get screwed again, basically. That's going to factor in because that's all part of this discussion. That's probably why the Premier League accepted the request for a rebate, in that they're about to start negotiating new deals. So they don't want to upset the people that they're about to negotiate with. They'd rather give them some money back now with the idea of making maybe a little more on the deal because maybe people will be happy with them. I don't know. It's a complicated game of chicken.
Yeah, and in going through both sides of the argument about rebate or not to rebate, I actually see the team side in this. That is a completely valid thought. Hey, you're not gonna have folks in the stands. They're going to be drawn to your product, and so we think that there's added value there. So I completely see where those top three clubs are looking at that notion, and I also see where the current broadcast partners are willing to kind of give a little wiggle room when it comes to the rebate. You don't have to pay it back all at once because these guys still want to have skin in the game when it comes to the next negotiation. They still want to be broadcast partners. So I can see where this give and take is, and I can see where both sides are coming from here. But yeah, I like what the clubs are saying when it comes to the rebate and exposing the TV product to more eyes, because you're not going to have folks who are going to be sitting there watching it in the first place.
But is it worth fighting over 30 million pounds right now when you're talking about $9 to $10 billion deal for the whole league? And this gets back to self-interest. Are the big clubs who would have to pay 20 million pounds more than the rest of the league to give this rebate, are they willing to take that short-term hit for the good of the league as a whole? I don't know. And I don't know where that togetherness is in the Premier League. This is what's hard about leagues like this because, okay, your top six, they're not worried about going down. Probably, another 5 teams or so are pretty comfortable in their place in the Premier League. The rest of the league is looking at, we might not be here next year. We might not be here in 2 years, that kind of stuff. And that makes it a little bit harder to do things like this where you've got to work together for the good of the league when your place in that league is not secure. That's why it's a little bit easier for MLS to move forward with things because you're secure. You're moving forward as a group. It's easier for leagues like France, like Spain, like Germany, because even if you're going to get bumped out of the Premier League or the top league, you're going to move down to the second division, which is part of the collective. You're not getting kicked out of the club. It's only a small number of teams out of the 40 or so that are worried about getting bumped out of the club, and they don't have as much clout, and they're more along for the ride anyway, so you've got more of a group pushing forward for the good of the whole collective. The Premier League doesn't necessarily have that, so it'll be curious to see how these kinds of things go. Will you get big clubs sacrificing for the smaller clubs? I don't know. I really don't know because we haven't seen it tested to this degree.
And the question brought up by Kogan, can this new contract bring in that 9 to 10 billion pounds, that $13 billion over the next 3 years? And that, to me, is the largest thought in the room because of where we are right now as a planet financially. That is a big number. Can it be met? Is it going to have to have some wiggle room in the contract?
It's not a number coming from one person. Let's make that clear. This is all of your TV rights. This is your domestic rights. This is your international rights. This is everything. So it's not like you're asking one person to cut a $13 million check. $13 billion check, sorry.
Right. But, you're talking 200 plus partners to come up with that number. And if I'm not mistaken, NBC Sports deal with the Premier League is worth $250 million, and they're right up there as a part of that negotiation too. And the Premier League has seen what the American market can be, but, I look at that. That's a big number right now for an economic situation that is still in a whole lot of flux.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough. And I think what Kogan is dead on about is you're not going to be able to increase ticket prices right now. You're not going to be able to increase your suites or your advertising, your hospitality, as they call it. You're not going to be able to increase those numbers because they're already high. There's no other way to dramatically affect your revenues. There's not another new revenue chain out there that I think can work unless you partner with somebody like a DraftKings or something like that and create that kind of idea. And it's interesting that this came through on the Front Office Sports newsletter, which I recommend subscribing to if you're interested in more of the business stuff. DraftKings they're planning to hit their revenue goal in 21 of $700 million. they are expecting a big rebound in the fall with the Masters, with the French Open, with Kentucky Derby, with NFL. They say Major League Baseball. I'm a little more skeptical of that one because they can't seem to get along very well. But he's talking about the massive potential for in-game betting. And he said it makes up 75% of revenue in the UK market, in-game betting. Would you see the Premier League, would you see leagues do an official betting partner if the money is there for it? I think that's going to be on the table now, maybe more than it's ever been, because it's an untapped revenue area that you're going to have to find right now, because those other revenue areas are going to be hit right now. They're going to be hurting. So if you want to keep paying the players the same, if the players expect the same amount of money, if the agents expect the same amount of money, you're going to have to find more money. And do you find it through something like a DraftKings, through something like that? I don't know. I don't know if you want to open up that door. It's going to be interesting to see, because I think the conversation will come up. I think you have to explore it if you're just doing due diligence as a businessman at these clubs.
There are those betting services in England, and for anybody that watches Sky Sports Saturday or something like that on NBC Sports Gold or something like that, subtle plug, you see Ladbrokes, you see Sky Bet, you see all of these companies promoting the props in the in-game betting and things like that. But I think that the DraftKings idea adds that element that we haven't quite seen yet. And would the Premier League be open to a DraftKings kind of a gambit here to add to what's there? Because I don't know of many other revenue streams that could be available that haven't been explored one way or the other so far.
I don't know what else you could do. I mean, there's always like membership things and stuff like that you could look at, but that's small money. There's only so much more you're going to be able to pull from your supporters, from your season ticket base. There's just not going to be much more money there. There's not going to be as much money on the sponsorship side. That's not going to be there either. It's going to have a decrease, not an increase, across the board, I think. You're going to have to find new revenue, because, you know, if you do something like a DraftKings and you are looking at no fans in the stands to start next season, or reduced capacities to start next season, maybe that helps mitigate that a little bit. That's why I think some people tried to paint the Bank of California deal with LAFC as a negative. I look at it as a huge positive, because you might take a smaller hit on what you have coming forward in a rights deal for stadium naming rights. You might not get that $6.5, $6 2/3 million per year. Maybe you get 5, maybe you get 4.5, but you're getting $20 million up front that you didn't expect now when you need it, because you're probably going to play this season or most of it behind closed doors. So you're getting an offsetting number that you didn't expect to come in to offset that loss of revenue. That's good business. And not everybody's going to have that option. But that, for LAFC, is very good business. You've got to find revenue that you didn't expect, that you didn't have before. And I think it's going to be even more of a challenge going forward. Another big bit of news in the Premier League from Darren Lewis at the Mirror. Troy Deeney is returning to Watford training. I spoke with a government chief. He said his fears have been allayed by the Premier League and the government's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam. He is set to return to work as full contact training, returns this week. He said, I only said that I wasn't going back for the first week. People took that as I'll never go back. I kind of push back on that, because his son still has the same condition. Like, it's not that he said he was temporarily not going back. I really hope that he's not going back because of this, because this is disgusting. Deeney revealed that his stance against returning sparked a flurry of vile insults, wishing coronavirus on his son, while his wife was also targeted in the street by people saying the player should return to work. I hope he's not returning to work for that. I hope he's not going back because of that, because of a bunch of morons and a bunch of idiots who are saying horrible, awful things on social media. There's been way too much of that here lately. I don't know if you guys saw it. I don't know if you follow it, but a female wrestler in Japan committed suicide over online bullying over the weekend, and it was really sad to see. I mean, a 22-year-old rising star, and some of the things that were said to her online were just awful. Nobody has that right. Nobody has that right to attack people online behind a keyboard. It's awful. And if Deanie is going back because of that, that's the wrong reason to go back. I don't necessarily buy that the whole thing. I said I wasn't going back for the first week. I didn't say I wasn't going back. That's maybe it's just trying to find a way to move forward. I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully, the Premier League, the government's chief medical officer, Van Tam, and the protocols that are in place helped convince him that it's safe and he's going to be protected and his son's going to be protected. The people who said these things should be banned from whatever service they're on, and they should be banned from buying tickets to support that club. That's awful. That's horrible. Should not be happening today. Should not at all.
Nope. Deanie said the first conversation he had with Jonathan was maybe 3 weeks ago. The last conversation we had was on Friday, and he had so much more information, so much more detailed analysis. So it just filled me with confidence that he's trying his best to make sure that we have all the information. The risk factor will be down to players, end quote.
That's the important thing, and that's where it felt like the disconnect was with Troy Deanie in the first place. It felt like that he was not being given all of the information that we were seeing. It felt like that he didn't know what all was being done to make it safe. So now he does, and it's good that it finally happened. Should have happened from the jump. It shouldn't have been such a concern. Not that he's wrong in having the concern. The information should have been there from day one.
Yeah, and that's one of the most important aspects to me in all of this. Everyone needs to be as informed as possible up front and have that information continue to evolve as you go. You don't want to hold something back and then sit there and then come through with other information. I think it's key that we all be as informed as possible from the absolute beginning when it comes to something like this.
Yeah, because you can't make decisions if you don't have all the money. I mean,
right.
If you don't have all the decisions, you don't have all the information. It's critical. It's just how these things work.
Yeah.
What's going on in League One? You said you had some stuff.
Well, for those watching on Twitch, I have gone topical today. This is not a reflection of how I feel about things in League One. I have broken out my Tranmere Rovers jersey today.
Okay.
And currently, the way things stand in the table, Tranmere is the top team. That one of the three teams that would be relegated. They are the closest to safety. They are 3 points from safety with a match in hand, and AFC Wimbledon is the team above them currently in the table, and that's the team, full disclosure, that I have one of my trusts involved in. So this is me being topical. This is not a reflection one way or the other about Tranmere Rovers for those of you watching on Twitch.
You want your team to get knocked out. That's what you want.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're wearing the team that's trying to knock them out. Where's your self-interest, John?
I wore FC Wimbledon last week.
Well, you should have worn it again, because if Tranmere gets their way, your boys are going down.
Yeah. No, this is me being topical. This is all this is. It says nothing. I'm not changing any kind of allegiance.
Everybody else is operating out of self-interest in League One and League Two. You should too.
Well, like I said, I did. I wore AFC Wimbledon last week, and it's in the wash. And, if you put something that's kind of dirty and smelly on, it's not good form. But anyway, from our friends at the Daily Mail, Tranmere owner Mark Palios insists relegation from League One is lazy and unnecessary and has an alternative idea.
Oh, it has an alternative idea. I just think it's a bad idea. What's the alternative idea?
I think it's a bad idea anyway. So, interview that he had with Martin Samuel. Right now, Tranmere, 21st, he says, it's like the ship is going down, and you can see a lifeboat with a space on it. You try to get on, but the people on board say, no, just 20 allowed here. And you point out the space, but they still won't let you on, so you drown. So Palios, Tranmere's won their last three, and they would be out on points per game even by .04. And so, and that's right now, if you went points per game, obviously everybody before that, especially my boys at AFC Wimbledon, because you'd be cleared by 4/100ths of a point. So Palios, who is by trade a an accountant. He's best known for his time as FA chair. So after his time at PricewaterhouseCoopers, they've done a lot to save money, and they're turning things around financially. What he is looking for, and this is a plan that apparently, according to Palios, long submitted to EFL chair Rick Perry, if the season can't be completed. It includes points per game, but with an average margin of error calculated across recent campaigns. It rules out relegation, but not promotion, and according to Palios, it widens the net to include all those with reasonable hope of going up. In League One, using the Palios math, on points per game with average margin of error, Coventry and Rotherham are promoted. All teams down to Doncaster in 9th would enter the playoffs. In League 2, 3 go up in the playoffs, reach Bradford down in 9th place.
Okay. That sounds great. Who's going to pay for teams in League 1 and League 2 in 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place, 6th place, 7th place, 8th place, and 9th place? First off, that's a 7-team playoff, so that's silly. You might as well go down to 10 and make it 8. All right, who's going to pay for 16 teams to have testing and have all the protocols followed to finish their season out? Reportedly, you're talking 140 to 200,000 pounds for these teams to finish a playoff to do this. Maybe with a playoff you can bring them back a little bit later. Maybe you can mitigate some of that, but you're going to have to pay a lot of money to play in a playoff that might not get you anything. That part is another element to this. The no relegation, that's easy. That's an easy call for me. That's you don't do that. But the idea of a promotion playoff for League 2 that has canceled their season, for League 1 that is probably going to cancel their season, but we don't have that confirmed yet, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for teams that don't have a lot of money. So where's that going to come from?
Yeah. Palios says, look, of course, we want to play. We won 3 games away before it stopped. We've got 3 games against teams immediately above us to come. The idea of sporting integrity has gone because there will be teams who will have lost players by the time of the restart who may be looking at half a youth team or be signing up new players, so I accept that.
Also true.
But points per game takes none of those nuances into account anyway. That's why margin of error must be recognized. Palios tells the Daily Mail...
numbers are numbers. The margin of error thing and the weighted points per game things, none of them work. None of them are good ideas here. None of them are the best way forward. For some leagues, they might be the only way forward, but none of them are good. There's no way to make it good.
He says, I know this will surprise you, so hold on to your chair and your headset. Palios won't rule out going to court.
Yeah, shocking.
To just be told, once again, Palios says, if there's no restart, you're relegated is unfair, he adds. The statement from the EFL was disrespectful, couched in terms of, quote, it's a pandemic, you can't please everybody, end quote. Yet every football person recognizes it is blatantly unfair unless you finish the season. Our kids go to school with mates wearing Liverpool and Everton shirts. We made them proud. Why should all that be cast aside just once? A helping hand here would be nice.
Man.
I want you to be nice until it's time to not be nice.
That's basically where you're at. You know, he's being nice, but court. Legal case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's going to happen because this is what stinks about it. Like, if you're going to do relegation and you're not going to finish the season, people are going to get screwed. There's just no way around it. I mean, you can come up with whatever formula you want, and you can do whatever you want with that. You're not going to be able to make it truly fair. It's impossible. If you don't finish out the season, you can't make it fair. So you don't relegate. The promotion side also, you can't make it fair. But that's not the same type of penalty. If you don't get a chance to play to get promoted, if you don't get a chance to get promoted because you don't get to finish the season out, that sucks as well, but that's a different level of suck. It is. You're not going to lose a dramatic amount of money in that regard. It just sucks. If you are getting relegated when it sucks, you could really put teams out of business. Like, that's the part that I've got a huge problem with. don't relegate. Just do the promotion. And why are we talking even about playoffs with these teams, especially with 7-8 teams in playoffs, where they're going to have to, as some of the League Two teams have said, they're going to have to bring players and staff back off of the unemployment scheme in the UK. You're going to have to pay them. You're going to have to pay for all the testing. You're going to have to pay for all of the protocols. You might not be able to pay those things. You're not going to have any fans coming in the stands. You haven't had any fans coming in the stands. So where is that money going to come from? It's probably not going to come from anywhere. So you're going to have playoffs where teams are not going to be able to participate because they can't afford to. That's going to happen too. Just don't do the playoffs. Just do 2 up. Do 2 up. That way you have 2 going up in the Premier League. Now the championship could be a different situation. If they can finish everything out and clubs can commit to the money that it's going to take, then fine, you do a playoff. I'm still not sold on the relegation side of it, but it's just not going to happen. You're going to have it. You're not going to have a bigger Premier League. You're not going to have these bigger leagues, even though it makes more sense right now. Nobody's thinking about sense. Nobody's thinking about it at the moment. You're thinking about tradition. You're thinking about the way things have been done in the past, and you're trying to put that into a world that is not the same thing. So I just hope they don't do that and put teams out of business by doing that. That's the fear that I have.
Yep. In an additional interview that Palios did with Samuel at the Daily Mail, Palios says that he had a conversation with a senior EFL executive, and that unnamed executive insisted that the idea of home and away matches against every league opponent is not the accepted finite structure of the season, which can be curtailed and considered concluded at any time.
Exclusive from The Telegraph. Premier League will restart on June 17th with Aston Villa at home to Sheffield United and Manchester City hosting Arsenal. There you go. Making progress.
June 17th. Okay.
The Telegraph has this right now, and the Telegraph has had a lot of good work during this. If I had more money to subscribe to the Telegraph, I would subscribe to the Telegraph. I am not subscribed to the Telegraph, so I do not have the full article. I'm sorry, Jason Burt. You do really good work. But I have a limited amount of money I can spend on subscriptions. The season, like I said, Wednesday, June 17th, Villa at Sheffield United, City hosting Arsenal. Those are the games in hand. That will take everybody up to 29 matches. Another Premier League game may be played on June 19th, but the full round of fixtures will start on June 20th, Saturday, with matches staggered across the weekend. They wanted to get the games in hand out of the way first. Pretty smart, and you move forward.
Dig it. Did you see the note from the Daily Mail saying that police can tell the Premier League that they can host games at home grounds when games resume, but they want key high-profile fixtures moved to neutral venues over fears of fans gathering outside?
Difference. It's going to be tough. I mean, I understand it. I get it, but I think they need to be talking to German clubs and the Bundesliga about how they've been able to avoid it. And as Willie P at 92.9, I mean, he had the question about, his concern was if you have college football games behind closed doors, that you would have the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It does come down to the individual fans to have some personal responsibility here. Just like the players have to follow their protocols, the fans are going to as well. And there's only so much you can do. The fear is that then it would be used as you can't have these things come back because people are going to get out of hand, and we can't have
nice
that.
Things.
Yeah, you can't have nice things because people are going to ruin it, and that's horrible. I hope they can figure out a way to deal with this. I hope that Liverpool fans could understand that they shouldn't gather outside of Anfield when they win the title because it's not safe to do so at the moment. Unless you're going to have everybody get tested on the way in and have a certificate to say that they're good to go in, but that ain't happening. So, I mean, these are the things we have to deal with right now. And if England can find a hybrid, if they can say, well, nobody really cares about Sheffield United, so fine, we'll have Sheffield United play, and they can control themselves. They can play at home, but Liverpool, no, we can't have them play in Liverpool. We have to have them play somewhere else. We have to send them up to Glasgow or send them somewhere else because
play in Birmingham.
I mean, you've got to do something. Like, it's a shame that you have to think that way, but yeah, it's got to be part of the conversation. I hope they find the way forward with it because that's been a huge hang-up in England and less of a hang-up elsewhere, but definitely one in England.
Yeah, so that's something that might have to be part of the equation. Police feel as long as their costs are covered and clubs can provide stewarding to ensure they can deal with potential issues, most matches can be played at existing stadia. But there are fears. Key matches at both ends of the table may well cause issues that remain if they remain at original sites. The final decision is down to the government in conjunction with the Premier League.
Yeah, you got a lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts in getting this stuff sorted out. So stay tuned because the 8-hour Premier League meeting is still ongoing. This is the first thing to come out of it. Who ran out and sent the text to Jason Burt? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, really? Oh, yeah.
Who ran out and did that? Was it the Premier League or was it one of the clubs? I don't know.
Yeah, that's I want to. And then are they going to get mad about the leak?
Well, if the league did it, if the league leaked itself, then no, that'll be cool. But if one of the teams leaked it, then maybe we have an issue. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of other things that are going on, and I'm going to follow John Percy and Jason Burt as we go forward.
Okay.
From the Telegraph.
Talk of the Town, League Two, their chairman and also Scunthorpe chairman, Peter Swan, he believes that the League Two season will be slightly delayed until September. He said to Grimsby Live, the beginning of August will be difficult, so you're probably looking at September at the earliest, which is another 3 months. That is going to be tough for clubs to survive. If it's the beginning of September, most clubs in this division will need money in July to help us get through until then. We are hoping it is September, and there's also talk of some semblance of crowds coming back if we can get our stadium in a position to do that. We will work as hard as we can in the coming months to have something in place so we can keep some sort of distance between the fans. At least if we can get 2,000 in or even 2,500 in, it's a big help. And that is a possibility. It is something we've really got to look at. He talked about the parking and the barriers and systems and all those kinds of things that they can do. He said, we are going to work as hard as we can, but at the moment we are just sitting here hemorrhaging money because nobody is making a decision, and that is frustrating for us. We are waiting to see what happens, but the frustration is at the time it has taken to get where we are now. I felt we could have done this very early on. There was never going to be an opportunity for League Two to get back in play because of the cost involved. The National League made their decision very early because of financial reasons, and perhaps we should have done that. Yeah, but a couple things jump out at you here. One, they're talking about finding a way to get fans in the stands as early as September at the lower divisions. That's big. But also, and this is the more important one, but people are going to look at the fans in the stands and talk about that. The idea that you're not going to be able to start until the beginning of September, and fourth division clubs, League Two clubs in England, are going to need money in July to get through till then. They're not going to be able to get to September if you don't have a cash infusion of some sort. That's scary. That's very scary, and you have to understand that.
And League One is still mad. A lot of folks in the league are still mad that there hasn't been a decision as of yet, and they're having to wait until June the 8th at the earliest to come up with a decision to figure out things one way or the other.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you got to make a decision. And, for me, like League Two, yeah, it was obvious you weren't going to have the money to do it. National League, obvious you weren't going to have the money to do it. I think League One, it's obvious you don't have the money to do it. And you should not do it. Championship is where I feel like they have a decision to make. I don't think it's clear-cut that they should do it. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to feel like they have to do it. Maybe they shouldn't. League One should not be playing. And you shouldn't be talking about a promotion playoff. I'm sorry. It's too expensive for too many teams that it doesn't guarantee you anything, and these teams don't have the money to play with. Not at League Two, not at League One. If most clubs in that division need money in July to survive, where are they going to find the money for a promotion playoff? You know? I mean, these are the realities, and they've got to figure this out. They've got to figure this out. Dale Johnson at ESPN on the Premier League announcement or leak about the 2 games in hand and then starting the weekend of June 20th, He said that leaves them ample time to complete the league in full by August 2nd and get the FA Cup rounds in too. There have been questions about what they do with the FA Cup. They are going to continue that. La Liga pretty much certain to return on June 11th, and they're going to play, after some back and forth with the government, they're going to play 32 consecutive days of football. And they're going to finish July 18th or 19th. So they're going to stagger the games out and play. They're going to have games every day. Italy, the FA is meeting with the government to lock down a proposed return for June 13th, which is the Sunday of that weekend. Or that's the Saturday, I think. I think La Liga is moving up a little bit to play on Thursday with their first game. June 13th for Italy, June 11 for Spain, June 17 for England. I mean, once the Bundesliga came back, it was kind of like everybody else had to get in line, get it done. MLS is going to be feeling that pressure a little bit too with the NWSL, with all these other announcements. There's some unsubstantiated rumors out there about initially a 24-hour thought process was given to the players, like, you guys think for 24 hours and we're going to vote on the Orlando plan as of now it's being presented. I don't know if all the changes that Jeff Carlisle talked about at ESPN are valid. I don't know if it's being cut from 5 games to 3 at the group stage. I don't know if the idea that they're going to go later in June and not do a full training camp in Orlando. That was all reported by Jeff Carlisle at ESPN. We don't know if that's in the proposal. Well, I saw some folks that write for reputable outlets but are not the tier 1 sources, and I don't want to diminish anybody's work by calling them out on that, but they're people who have not broken this kind of news before, saying that 24-hour deadline has been extended to 72 hours, so 3 days, to sort out if you're going to go with the plan that is on board right now or have to go back to the drawing board. I'm still of the opinion that we'll have an announcement before the end of the week, which should be tomorrow, which is getting kind of close, that MLS will have its roadmap to getting back on the field. I think they need to get it going sooner rather than later in terms of the plan to get back on the field. They don't need to rush back on the field. It's got to be safe. But the plan to get back on the field, I think they need to go ahead and get out there on this, because they can get back before the NBA, before Major League Baseball, before the National Hockey League, just after the NWSL, maybe even before these other, probably not before these other leagues. These European leagues will be ahead of them. But maybe before Champions League, before stuff like that. They can get back on the field and get back to something. And I think getting back in that conversation is going to be important. It's got to be done safely. I think we're seeing now that the testing capacity is strong enough. The plan for testing, I would hope, is going to be strong enough to make this a safe step back. I think all the other protocols, the day-to-day stuff, is pretty standard across any sport. It's just getting it done. And the financial side of it, I think Carlisle had reported that you initially had a 20% cut. Then it came down to, I think, a 5% cut and 5% deferral from the players, along with bonuses being cut and things like that. It was cutting overall compensation by around a third. Now I think on the salary cut side of it, there's if Carlisle reported it at 7.5%. So basically you're trying to split the difference. Okay. Find whatever it is to split the difference. Let's go ahead and accelerate that. Once that's done, you can then get the sign-off on the plan, and you can move forward. I don't think they're that far away if these are the numbers we're talking about.
No, I don't think they are either. And you mentioned the NWSL, and we were going back and forth yesterday, and I was not so slowly being driven crazy by all of the major networks sitting here and discussing the NHL plan as, hey, they're the first ones back. And I'm sitting there going, no, they're not.
Batman after he lies on national TV.
Mm-hmm. I was not a fan of that, and I almost ended up tweeting national news anchors and referring them to the NWSL decisions. And so, hello. But, drove me crazy yesterday.
It's okay. It'll be all right, John.
Just get it right.
It'll be okay.
That's all I want. Get it right.
Well, why don't you get it right and tell everybody about
Jason
a good
Wright?
friend, Steve Apolinsky.
I feel like the dating game music or something like that should be coming up right now. AA-legal.com. Steve Apolinsky and Associates, proud supporters of everything SDH Networks and Soccer Down Here. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. Wrongful death, serious injury lawyers, the best in the biz. Top 100 in the state, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine. Couple of different ways you can get in touch with them. 404-377-9191. Free consultation if you give them a buzz. Or reach out to Steve himself, STEVE, at AA-legal.com. And if you go to AA-legal.com, instantaneous response. You want to know how I know that? Because when you go to AA-legal.com, pop-up window, low right-hand corner, and you can have a live chat with somebody, 24/7, 365. You got a question at like 3:52 in the morning? Boom, live chat right there. So it's covered. Best in the business, Steve Apolinsky and Associates, Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, AA-legal.com.
Nicely done. All right, Australia has made some progress.
Oh, hello.
It's been bumpy, though, because...
Yes.
Oof. Let's start with Andrew Durante of Western United FC, club in the A-League. On his Instagram stories yesterday, I'm just going to read it because this is pretty strong. This was yesterday. There have been developments since this. He said, we stopped the season because of COVID. Okay, fair. That's his response to it. COVID cases start to decline. Maybe the season can start up again! Exclamation mark. Nope! All caps! Exclamation mark. Fox won't pay the $12 million owed for broadcasting. League put back on hold. Fox finally pay the full amount. Amazing! We are going to finish the season. Nope! Exclamation mark. FFA decided to keep majority of the Fox money. League put back on hold again. FFA and PFA finally come to a pay agreement. Great-ish deal, but a deal nonetheless. The season is back on. Nope! Exclamation mark. Fox will only broadcast the games if we agree to a $10 million per season broadcast deal. WTF is going on with our game? Enough is enough. It's beyond a joke now. Well, the joke wasn't funny, and the FFA has released a statement this morning, and their CEO, James Johnson, the FFA is Football Federation Australia. It's their federation, their FA. The Hyundai A-League clubs and the Professional Footballers Australia have reached an agreement on a comprehensive plan for the restart of the Hyundai A-League 2019-20 season. Committed to delivering the competition, have agreed a comprehensive plan. That's according to James Johnson, the CEO. They worked very hard behind the scenes, standard statement, boilerplate, da-da-da-da-da. We are now looking forward to the agreement of our broadcast partner, Fox Sports, to our fixture proposal and timings. That's the final piece of the jigsaw, and once we have it in place, we can move forward quickly. Ideally, mid-June, this is from Johnson, we'll see players return to training, allowing them to reach the required elite level of fitness for competitive matches to commence by mid-July, and for the Hyundai A-League Final Series to be completed by mid-August. The proposed timing will mean that the culmination of the Hyundai A-League will coincide with the restart of Australian grassroots football, connecting the professional game and our 2 million participants like never before. The part about, we've got an agreement, we're ready to move forward, we've been working really hard, and now we're waiting for Fox Sports to agree to things. That felt like kind of a kick, prod. Hey, guys, can you get this done? We'd like to move forward now. Yep. Dominic Bossi, who's a great expert on the Australian game, Sydney Morning Herald, has an article that just came up a little bit ago talking about the statement, but also the issues with Foxtel, which is the parent company of Fox Sports Australia. They've got to cut costs. They've got debt of over $2 billion. They had to cut 250 jobs in the past month. Bossi writes that there's a growing belief that Foxtel's desire to televise the A-League has diminished. Sources with knowledge of the negotiations suggest that Foxtel sought to reduce its $57 million check to the Federation So $57 million a year to the Federation. They want to reduce that by more than 75% for the remaining 3 years of the deal. We had heard 50%. Now they're up to 75%. Of course, Foxtel declined to comment, which can't really blame them. This is all going to have the teams in the greater Sydney region to play the remaining games in venues behind closed doors. A couple stadiums involved. They've got it all worked out, and they would have any games involving only teams from Victoria would be the first to be played. They'd be held behind closed doors in Melbourne before the teams go to Sydney. That makes sense. That's a smart move.
Yep.
So they've got the plan, but they've got to get Foxtel on board because I believe there is still money to be paid and also games getting on the TV calendar. So discussions remain ongoing. A-League sources suggest they will not accept a lowball offer simply to resume the season. Yeah, this is going to be fun. It's like an announcement, and I want to see what Durante says, because I thought his commentary on the last one was really good. I want to see what his commentary is now going forward on this. So I'm going to be following Andrew Durante on Instagram, Durante_22.
I got a couple things on the Twitters this morning. You want to hop into that real quick?
What do we got?
Cuppers came in this morning. He says, I know y'all will disagree, but sound should be pumped in stadiums. Not just general noise, but strategic chants, etc. I think it could work and help add back some home field advantage. Yes, it could also be terrible. I think the Falcons could provide support.
Ay, Dios mío. Why do you think we're going to disagree, Cuppers? I like the idea of it being in the stadium more than being it faked on the broadcast. I like that better because then it's at least natural sound. Yeah, it could be terrible if people to use it in an awful way, but it's better than having somebody pump sound in that the broadcasters, the commentators are not hearing. I mean, that's the biggest disconnect is multiple times you've had blaring crowd noise that is fake, shots of empty stands, and the commentators talking about how quiet it is. It's bizarre. Like, they're not on the same page. That if you're going to do it, pump it in the stadium. I would rather they don't do it at all. That's my vote. But if you're going to do it, pump it into the stadium so then it's coming across on TV as more natural. It's going to sound a little more natural. You're going to be able to have the mix a little more natural. Right now, I don't like the way they're doing it typically. They've had a couple that have done a good job. I don't like the idea of it because it can be more bad than good.
Yeah.
The good is harder to reach. It can go bad. If you're going to do it, pump it into the stadium and give the teams the option to have a certain number of clips from previous games. If the league's going to distribute it to make sure it's fair, okay, fine. If you're going to keep them from being able to play music or whatever, that's fine too. But yeah, it does go back to home field advantage. There's been no home field advantage in Germany. I think 3 or 4 home wins out of 20-plus games. I mean, there's no home field advantage. It's one of the things that's jumped out here. And the BBC reporter who covers the Bundesliga, Konstantin Eckner, and I guess if we're going to talk BBC, we do need to give them their proper credit.
Of course.
For we are the BBC News Service.
Oh, not now.
Konstantin Eckner says home advantage has been eliminated, but the actual playing time is higher in matches without crowds because you have shorter interruptions. Hansi Flick, manager of Bayern, said it is now important the players push themselves. The bench can also have a positive impact and motivate them. He said he and his colleagues have the advantage of having their instructions actually heard, which is a very key thing. We've talked about this with Stephen Glass for Atlanta United too. You know, it's hard for a manager in a game, even at the USL Championship level, for their instructions to be heard. You get to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you get to a full stadium, forget it. There's only so much you can do. That's why you see notes being passed. You can't yell across the field. Nobody's going to hear you. Right now, people are going to hear you. You can actually impact the match. The bench can actually motivate people because you can hear them. Also, according to Eckner, leaders on the field have benefited from this. and Borussia Dortmund goalkeeper Roman Bürki. He said, if you play in front of 81,000 fans, you have no chance to give instructions to the midfielders. Now, Mats Hummels, as our chief defender, or I can sometimes conduct the midfield, or we warn teammates when they have an opponent behind them. That's changed the game a little bit. Now, Sky Germany, they're the main TV rights holder. Their ratings have been record-breaking. 6 million tuning in to watch the first few matches after the break. The novelty was gone a week later, but they still kept 3 million plus watching the Saturday games. These are games that Sky Germany generally puts their product behind the paywall, whatever subscription service they have. These are not. These are going out over the air. So you have been able to get some eyeballs. The game's been a little different because of some elements that are enhanced. The home field is not what it was. It's diminished. But you're getting these games played, and Bayern's going to win the league again, and that's no surprise. So everything's as it should be, right?
Yep. Let's see. What was the other? Oh, Tafka's in this morning, and it's Tactics Tafka today. Tafka is coaching Rec 10 and 11s. He says it's their first 11v11 league. Passing is still not an accurate science, and there are no headers allowed. Most of these kids have never played a position, and he put that word in quotes. He settled on a 3-5-2 with the understanding that leaving space at our corners was acceptable risk. Wingbacks at that age obviously can't play both ways all game, so I let the game dictate whether I tell them to stay forward more or stay back more. I plan on coaching the high press and the offside trap. There are tough learning curves, but they'll be better for it in the long run. I'm aware that 3-5-2 is not ideal for a proper press, but at their age, it's more about coaching the aggression and the instinct to challenge and mark across the field as opposed to just half the field.
The things I would recommend is you don't want to do... I think the negative side of pressing for me is teams then don't want the ball. You don't want to have that element of it. You want to press, but then teach the team to play in possession once they regain possession. That's going to be an important thing at that age, because if they don't learn to get comfortable with the ball, then they're never going to get comfortable with the ball. It's a key element of young kids. You want them to have the ball as much as possible. So teaching them to go get the ball is a good thing. To go win the ball back, that's all great. You just don't want to have the other element of pressing like we see with the Red Bulls, where they don't want possession, period. They don't want the ball. They just play it long and then go press. Please don't teach them that way. Teach them when they don't have the ball to press, to go get it back, to fight it back quickly, to win it back quickly. Those things are great. I wouldn't worry about an offside trap. Don't talk about offside trap. Talk about playing a high line. That would be this is all my recommendation, by the way. Do what you need to do with your team. I don't know your team. But generally at this kind of age, don't try to have something like a trap, because then they're not necessarily learning the finer arts of defending. But do teach them to play in a higher line, because that's part of the press. You know, if you're going to put pressure on a team, you've got to have your back line step up higher and condense the field and talk about it in those sense. Don't have them be looking for an AR in terms of an offside trap, things like that. That's finer points. You got to get the basics at this age. It's not about winning the game via an offside trap at this age. It's about teaching the foundational skills. Pressing and winning the ball quickly, very important. Playing in possession, very important. The basics of positioning, very important, and keep it basic. Having a shape to do that, absolutely. That's fine. In terms of pressing in a 3-5-2, all you need to do is just make it clear to your two forwards that they need to step wider, and your number 10 steps up. So basically you start pressing with a line of 3. The 3-5-2 turns into a 3-4-3. If you have players who can handle that level of instruction, do it, because that's a good little point you can make, and it's something that will help players later on. I wouldn't waste time on the offside trap, and I wouldn't focus on the negatives of the high press. I disagree that they'll be better for it in the long run. I don't think so, because they don't have the basics down first. At this age, they can't. You need to teach them the pressing style, the pressing idea. Sure, go win the ball back as quickly as possible. The mentality is really good, but the negative sense of pressing teams where they don't want possession, you have to have your players on the ball as much as possible right now. At 8, 9, 10, That's where, at that age, I think the way I've always looked at it is under 8, it's all individual work. It is all dribble, dribble, dribble. Don't worry about passing. The shooting, I mean, you want to get them comfortable shooting, but it's all about dribbling. It's all about changing direction. It's all about manipulating the ball with both feet, all parts of the foot, inside the foot, outside of the foot, the instep, the sole of the foot, all of it. You want to make sure that you're teaching the foundations of things, because if you don't, they're not going to pick it up later. Once you get to this group, 8, 9, 10, that's where you're talking about not necessarily overall team play. I mean, playing 11v11 at this age, not honestly all that recommended. But if you're doing it, you're keeping the shape and the positions very basic. You're looking for combinations. At these ages, kids are just getting comfortable with sharing. They're just getting comfortable with passing the ball. So you're looking for combination play. You're looking for 1-2s. You're looking for players to get their head up and look for a pass and be willing to make a pass. You still don't want to teach them not to dribble. If you've got a kid who's a dribbler, man, let that kid dribble as much as possible, because that's where they learn to take chances. That's where they learn what they can and can't do. You don't want to overcoach at this age. So just think about creating a framework and then letting them work within it. Things like pressing, things like offside traps, things like that are more for older kids. You don't want those to get in the way of the basic individual skills, because that's what you're focusing on at this age. So in game, I mean, you can talk a little bit about things that come up to try to win the game, but in general, you're trying to teach these kids skills that when they move on to their next coach, when they move on to their next team, when they play at an elite club, when they play in high school, whatever it is for them, that they've got a foundation to fall back on. That's the key at this age. That's the important thing.
One more note from Nathan Pugh before we get back into everything else going on around the world, and there are a couple of other England notes that we can circle back to at the end. Nathan says, go Tranmere, the third best team on Merseyside behind Liverpool and the Liverpool reserves, of course. I cannot endorse that statement simply because if you go to points per game model, AFC Wimbledon gets relegated. I can't endorse that, Nathan. If they could be the 9th best team in a 3-team section, that's fine.
Michael Head, not a fan of the piped-in crowd noise. He says, who thinks MLS will do it right? Not me. I don't know about that. I again, just like John doesn't give the Spanish sound engineers credit, I will give the American sound engineers credit, because I know a few. I think they can do it right.
There's one on this show.
Huh?
You're a DJ. You know about. I'm
not a sound engineer on a broadcast. That's what we're talking about.
No, but DJs know the room. You've got to know the room.
But DJs aren't sound engineers necessarily on broadcasts. That's what we're talking about here. So I think MLS sound engineers can do the job right. But the margin for error is big, because when it's bad, it's really bad. I will take natural sound, no crowd noise over bad fake sound.
Yes, agreed.
If it's done 100% perfectly, it can help. It can be better than just natural sound, but it's got to be in the background. It's got to be minimal. It can't distract you, because there's nobody in the stands. I mean, it's the reality of it. Like, when you're getting distracted by something fake in a broadcast, that's bad. It can't be distracting.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I'll go back to the Mines example. The fact that you had tight crowd shots, tight action shots. You weren't showing a whole lot of the empty stadium. And Mines had taken care of putting that large banner over on the far side opposite the main television camera position. And the mixing of the crowd noise on the feed, it honestly, for me, just felt like it was a very tight TV shot with crowd noise behind you. Instead of, hey, you're in an empty stadium and this international feed has the enhanced crowd behind it. It was legitimately, for me, the only thing that registered in my head is, they're just not showing crowd shots. That was probably the best example that I can give so far that we've heard.
Yeah, and now you're tying multiple elements into it. It's not just the crowd sounds. You're talking about the visuals with it, too. Mm-hmm. The noise is where I'm more focused in on. look, we know it's fake. There's nobody in the stands. We know that, so you can show it or not show it. We already know that. If it's like the beginning of the Dortmund Bayern game was, it's just lay off on the 5 Red Bulls before the game and turn the knobs down to about 5 instead of 12 where they were. It was too much, and it's got to be background noise. It's got to be, like somebody described it as white noise, and I get that. Like, it's got to be that. If it was real, okay, it can be as loud as you want it to be. If it's fake, it's got to be in the background. If it's anything more than that, it just does not work. I thought the Daily Mail had given us some more information on the Premier League, but it looks like they are repeating the same things that everybody else has said. A little bit on the way that the group training works. Groups of 5 is the group training right now. That is all that is allowed. Thursday morning, this morning, training looked more familiar as you had contact. So Newcastle posted pictures of their first team stars in contact training today. Let's see if there's anything else here. That was agreed on Tuesday, as you remember. That moved you forward here. Only 4 positive tests out of just over 1,000 in round 3 of testing. Others will wait for 2 more rounds of clear results before moving into the Phase 2. Because you've had a few teams, I think Norwich was one, that did their first tests in the second round of testing. So it's not exactly lined up. And it sounds like as part of the protocol, which I had not heard, you have to have 2 clear tests to move into the contact training. So, okay, that's another good element that I had not heard about yet. We know the dates, we know all that, more to follow from the Daily Mail, so keep up with that. Man, the way their website is structured is ridiculously bad.
Yeah, and all the pop-ups and burying the leads and all that kind of stuff. Tafka has responded to you about your initial thoughts. He says, yes, he was thinking Peachtree Press, not Red Bulls.
Yes. And
not so much of trap where they step at the last minute, but instigating the higher and flat line to take the field away from the opponent. He says his tweets often lack detailed explanation.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's tweets. That's what we're all about. But yeah, don't overdo it would be the main thing I would say. Like, teach instinct, teach basics, but not don't structure it too much. Let the kids play. That would be the big thing. A couple things on Twitch as we're upstreaming there now. Had a few technical difficulties earlier, but we're back. Tesco likes the fake crowd sound, but he can see how some wouldn't like it. They should make it an SAP feature, and that's what it is in Germany. You can turn it on and off. Here, it's not. Like, you're just getting the feed or you're not getting the feed. I think there was a game yesterday that the broadcaster, it wasn't Sky Germany, it was another broadcaster that had that game, and they didn't offer the fake crowd noise side of it. So, I don't know. Jada Gid, a little bit on the last thing I said about that. I think I mixed up a couple of things about the group training. The group training, it's all about progression. They were going from individual training to group training in the Premier League. Here in MLS, for example, they haven't gone to the group training. I think as much of the group training, honestly, is about establishing protocols and just slowly ramping up. I think it's not, they don't want to go from individual training to full team training. The thing that I didn't know in the Premier League was that idea that teams needed 2 clear tests before they're going into the contact training. That part makes sense to me. We've talked a lot about the testing in the Premier League and this idea that the 2 negative tests, or 2 false tests, let's put it that way. If you have 2 tests that are incorrect in 1 week's time, and that's the way they're doing the testing right now, the odds are like 7,000 to 1. So they're not doing it based off 1 test, they're doing it off 2. So if you go from the individual training to the group training that is still small groups but no contact, and there's no outbreak, there's no rash of positive tests, you have 2 clear tests, then the teams can move forward into the contact training. I think I botched that a little bit as I was explaining it. I hope that makes a little more sense. I think, for me, the whole idea about, the virus and how many people in a group and these kinds of things, it's more about the testing. If you're doing the testing correctly, if you're doing it multiple times a week, if you're handling all that as well, there is an antibody test as part of it in the NWSL, in the MLS plan to come back. I know, like the SEC, for example, that was part of their plan to come back. I think it's part of the Premier League plan to come back, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I think since everybody else is doing it, I would assume that it is. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. It should be. I think just to have a better understanding of where your players have been from a physical perspective, and if they've been exposed to it already, showing prior infection, as Jada Gidd says, that kind of stuff. I don't know if it changes the speed or the safety part of it. I think it's good information, and if we're finding more with the antibodies and donating plasma and things like that, and teams can use that as a way to do good in their community and have players who are showing antibodies and they're comfortable donating plasma, and that would help, then great. That's a great thing to do if you can. But I don't think it affects the rate to come back to physical play and contact training and all that. I think that's more about the virus tests and having 2 clear tests before you come back. I think that's the key here.
Chris Hutchison wanted to know, what if they used Zoom or other feeds for crowd noise? Would it handle tens of thousands of fans? And Chris, we may actually get our answer tonight, or this afternoon local time. Article out of The Guardian. Denmark, and this is from Niall McVeigh, Denmark will become the second country in mainland Europe to restart their league season. In the AGF Aarhus Randers match, you're going to see a giant screen 40 meters long, 3 meters high, filled with fans watching via video link.
Okay.
Supporters have signed up for free tickets to take part and can even choose their preferred section of the virtual stand. 2 smaller screens will allow for neutrals and away fans to be there too. The concept created in partnership with Zoom. According to AGF's head of media, Soren Carlson, quote, "I've never been so busy before a game, which is funny when there are no spectators. My colleagues, to put it bluntly, have been working their arses off to get everything working," end quote. The screens are the final piece of the puzzle. They're being dropped in. They were dropped into place yesterday at the stadium. Fans will form a digital backdrop for watching TV viewers, but sound has proved a stumbling block. Carlson says, imagine a big Zoom meeting, 10,000 people with their microphone on. It would be just white noise.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. That was the concern with doing some kind of Zoom call for sound noise. I just don't think it's possible. Hungary is jumping out in front of everybody else, and the Hungarian Football Federation, this is from Loop Jamaica, which credit to the Jamaican news for getting this one. The Hungarian Football Federation says matches in the country can once again be held with spectators in the stands. A government decree allows the option of it. Clubs can make that decision for themselves. Organizers obligated to keep 3 seats empty between each occupied seat. No fan may sit directly behind or in front of one another. Players and essential personnel on or near the field during matches have to have most recently tested negative for coronavirus. It's up to clubs on their own. Tickets for next Wednesday's Hungarian Cup final between Budapest Honvéd and Mezőkövesd Zori. Oh, man. At the Ferenc Puskás Stadium in Budapest. Those are going to be sold online. Tickets will be available for a game next Wednesday in Hungary.
And apparently Midtjylland is going to be doing something the equivalent of a drive-in movie. They're going to set up big screens outside their stadium for fans to watch their first game back on Monday, too.
Yep, we've heard about that kind of stuff as well. I think this is news from Spain. It's not anything that we had not heard yet. June 11th is the date they're going to come back with, and that is a Thursday, and that is the Derby Sevillano, Sevilla and Real Betis. That's going to be the first game back. So, looks like they are moving forward. Let's see if there's anything updated here in the article from Cadenesur, as we do some translation, so I can double check my poor Spanish. The final weekend of play would be July 19th. 2 days per week and games every day. Okay. The league met today, so this is updated. Javier Tebas, the president of La Liga, confirmed that La Liga would resume on June 11th, end on the weekend of July 19th. Other decisions, there will be matches every day, weekend and during the week. After finishing the league, the promotion playoff to the first division will be played until August 2nd. The health protocol that has been planned will be maintained, and we went through that I think last week. It was pretty detailed. It's mostly based off the Bundesliga plan, but one thing that they didn't really dig into was the whole idea about celebrating goals and that type of stuff. They didn't even touch on it. So I think we're seeing that kind of get pushed to the side in Germany as players are reacting like players. They're celebrating when a goal happens. It's kind of just a human reaction. Next week, full training sessions with the entire squad in Spain. Some dates for the financial control of clubs have been postponed because they can't be met. Those dates can't be met given the situation. And just the idea that the league and the teams have to do everything possible to avoid any issues and avoid any outbreaks. So Spain is moving forward. That's another step for them. June 11th, they will be back on the field.
Did you watch, how much of the Costa Rican League did you watch yesterday?
First half. I mean, it wasn't a great game. Limon's not exactly a strong team here. It's awesome that ESPN put that on and put it on in English, and Adrian Healy and Alejandro Moreno did a really good job. I don't know if they were in the same place doing it. I don't think they were. It felt like there was a little bit of a delay at times between the two, but I thought they handled it really well, and they were, really well informed on a league that they don't cover, they don't follow. So I thought they did a really good job with it. The funniest thing was the pitch wasn't ready. Yep. I mean, Saprissa, like the grounds crew, forgot the arcs on the corners and forgot one penalty area. At least there was enough of the paint remaining to where they could go ahead and move forward, but kind of forgot a couple things and marking the field there, guys.
Yep, and I was the guy who was watching the early game on CATV, Central American Television, and it was a big loss by Alajuelense against mid-table Brescia. So with Saprissa's win, Saprissa is now 7 points clear with only a handful of matches to go in the Clausura.
Turner Kirby with a question, and I don't know, it wasn't in the article, about Hungary. Will exceptions be made for families about that 3-seat separation? Logically, you'd think they would be. The problem is going to be for a team, when you really start to think about it, can you ensure that the people buying tickets to sit next to one another are in the same household? Mm-hmm. And that's what it comes down to. If they're in the same household, then they should be able to sit next to one another, but can you ensure that? I don't know if you can. And if you can't, you have to have the 3-seat separation. And for a family, I mean, it's not like you're going to be that far away. I mean, you could probably make it to where, like, they're not sitting next to one another, but they're sitting, like, one behind the other. Not right behind, as they said, they're not doing that, but one over, and maybe you're in more of a vertical group than a horizontal group. I don't know. They're going to have to figure that part out. It's a good question, but it's a very hard one to ensure that people are telling the truth on. Because, if you just want to be, no, I want to sit with my friend who lives across town that I haven't seen for all this. But, yeah, we live in the same household. He's my cousin. He's my brother. He lives in my basement. I mean, you can't. Yeah. Like, it's going to be really hard for a team, especially if you're selling tickets online, to be able to ensure that. I don't think they're going to be able to. I think they're going to have to maybe create something when you buy tickets that you want to be grouped near one another vertically as opposed to horizontally. It's probably going to be the only way forward.
Yeah, so, I want to see if they do it and how they pull it off and how successful it is. Interesting idea. I just want to see the execution.
A quote from Jeff Lorenowitz. This is from our friend Mike Conti on Twitter, at MikeConti99. Lorenowitz on what happens if there's a positive test in Orlando. He said, "We're not going there for a conference. We're going there to make physical contact and breathe on each other. I can't say we've gotten a full answer that covers everything at the moment. We're working on it." that's part of the protocols. Look, I've said in general and in the whole MLS thing, I think they've got to get the financials sorted out first before you can plan the rest of it. I'm sure they have a protocol. I mean, you have plenty to go on by now with what Germany's done, with what Spain has put out there. Now England is stepping forward, what NASCAR has done. You have a sense of how to create the protocols. The answer should be given to the players, and if they're not being given, then that's slowing the process down. But I think it's going to be easily solved once you get the financials sorted out. Once you get the financials, once you get the time frame of the Orlando event, then down to this level, I think you're good. I think it's going to be down to the testing. Yep. It's 100% down to the testing. If you are doing testing twice a week or more, as some have proposed, then you can create the system. I think the NWSL is pretty well detailed in what happens in their scenario if you have a positive test, even breaking it out. Positive test asymptomatic, positive test symptomatic, positive test sick. Like if somebody is not feeling well beyond just basic symptoms. I think they've got things nailed down pretty well. That gives you another guideline. So I think that's an easy solution. It should already be on the table, and I don't know why it's not.
Speaking of other things before we go into other countries, what's the update on the masks? That's been something that a lot of folks have been showing their pictures on the timeline, getting their Soccer Down Here masks delivered. What's the latest?
Yeah, they should all be out. Everybody who has bought one should have them out. There's like 3 or 4 left if you want one. Shoot us a message if you want to get one. It's $20, and we donate one on your behalf to Soccer in the Streets. Really just working out the logistics of dropping something off to them and not breaking any protocols right now. So I'll be getting those over to them hopefully tomorrow. But there's 4 left if you want to buy one. So there's 4 left to sell, which would also have 4 more to donate. So it's a very small number. Get it now if you can, if you want to. Those are going to get donated to Soccer in the Streets if we don't sell them here soon. So kind of last call here if you want to get a mask. Thanks everybody who got one and supporting the kids over at Soccer in the Streets, kids who maybe don't have the means to go track down a mask, families who might not have the means to go track down a mask. It's a mask that you can wash and reuse. It's one of the Gator style masks. Hopefully when we're done with all this, it can become a headband for you or whatever else you need it to be. It's multi-purpose. So thanks to everybody for jumping on that and allowing us to get some masks over to Soccer in the Streets. And thanks to Die Hard, our friends over there. Gonzalo is awesome and getting stuff done quickly. And also, since we wanted to do this charitable component, making it feasible to do, making it a price point that worked for everybody in this. So thanks to everybody for making that happen. I'm really happy to get these masks over to Soccer in the Streets this week.
What country do you want to hit next?
Let's run through really quick because we got a lot of like odds and ends countries to talk about here. Mm-hmm. Ireland, their restart plans have been handed a boost. We talked about this a while back. They're doing like a ramp-up tournament with their top 4 teams. It's almost like a test. All of those players and staff tested negative for COVID-19, so they're good to go, keep moving forward. All is good. Some news out of France and some not-so-good news out of Lyon. Per CNews_sport on Twitter. The men's team, the top team for Lyon, refused to reduce their wages in light of losses that the club is suffering during the pandemic. The women's team, which is possibly the best in the world, they did agree to reduce their wages. Jean-Michel Aulas, your boys aren't looking so good here. That's a bad look. That's a really bad look. Netherlands, well, actually, Bonaire, which is part of the Dutch Caribbean, they are trying to get the Dutch Federation to allow the Dutch Cup final to be played and to be played in Bonaire between Utrecht and Feyenoord. It'd be interesting. It'd be different. Yeah. We'll see about that. Red Bull, which I was not drinking this morning, I was back to the Coke Energy. Red Bull is looking to add another club, and they're looking in Russia. And they're looking at a club FC Ufa? UFA?
Ufa.
Ufa?
Ufa.
They're looking at buying FC Ufa, Red Bull Ufa. They're in the Russian Premier Liga, and according to Russian sources, Red Bull could be buying them out. I don't think Red Bull's necessarily hurting for money right now.
No.
So Hungary is going to have fans. Greece is trying to have fans. The sports minister is receptive to an idea during their playoffs that 20% of the stadium capacity is used for the Greek Super League. The league has asked the state. The sports minister is at least receptive to the idea. So we will see if they get it done. A couple things in this neck of the woods. This was from yesterday. Dwayne Rollins, who hosts the show Soccer Today, he tweeted out that he had an interesting conversation with someone with knowledge of CONCACAF, and it was suggested to Dwayne Rollins that several Caribbean federations are in danger of not being able to fund a World Cup qualifying campaign for 2022. CONCACAF League, that money goes in to fund this stuff. CONCACAF Champions League goes in to fund this stuff. The Gold Cup next year will be very important. If that doesn't happen, World Cup qualifying will be almost wiped out because these federations don't have the money. The money hasn't been coming in. You haven't had league games. You haven't had any way to bring in revenue. They might not be able to actually fund a qualifying campaign. CONCACAF's got to figure out the format for this World Cup qualifying campaign because it's going to have to change. Now you're going to have to measure this part of it out too. How do you fund it all? In Canada, the Canadian Premier League, they are making progress in getting back into training. Teams could be returning to team facilities for the individual workouts in the coming days, but it's not finalized yet what the return to play looks like. That's from Oliver Platt at One Soccer.
We've got a lot of action for those that are going to be surfing their social media platforms and all of their other media platforms. Have a couple of countries going on right now. We mentioned what's going on in Denmark with the Zoom fans, and we've also got more Costa Rican action. 5 o'clock, it is Guadalupe and Zeladon in mid-table. Guadalupe is minus 137, courtesy of our friends at Odds Portal.
Man, I'm not touching those games right now. That's just craziness. More news out of Spain. We just talked about the plan to come back. We've talked about Barcelona's financial problems. They are cutting their scouting department in half from 40 to between 15 to 20 people. The management said that it was a poorly organized area of the club. It's also an economic measure to help save money. But these are the things that even big clubs like Barcelona are dealing with at the moment. More highlights from Jeff Lorenowitz. This Mike's got this all on his Twitter. This was from a conversation earlier today. I believe he was on with John and Hugh. I might be wrong. This might be separate. I'll try to get the source behind it. But highlights of it, and it's a long thread. Everyone's working on both sides. He is on the executive board of the MLSPA. Everyone's working. That's all he can really say. The Players Association is looking for all the information they can get. He thinks that the league is still working on providing the most information they can. He said, I think there is still a lot of uncertainty out there, but when we feel as players that all of our concerns have an answer that acknowledge risk and has a course of action to mitigate that risk, we'll be good to move forward. He said, as much as we'd love to march back onto a soccer field, we'd like to know we're doing the right things to get there. He said that full team training, when allowed, won't need to be very long. He said from a tactical standpoint, some of that will be figured out in early games. We've seen that in Germany, too. 2 weeks was the idea for full team training in MLS. I don't know if they've moved from that at this point. He said the Orlando tournament cannot look like the Dallas Cup, which is a big youth tournament. He said the quality of play is very, very important. On the proposal, he said there's no doubt that it's going to be a major adjustment for everyone. You're talking about 8:30 games. How do you prepare? How do you sleep? How do you play 4 days later at 11 p.m.? Yeah, all those things are absolutely real. This is one of the more important ones. He said, we have to be sympathetic to the league, just as the league has to be sympathetic to us. Very few of them have been players and know what it takes day to day to get things done and get on the field. That's where guys in the league like Jeff Agus, like Aleko Eskandarian, guys who have been players, do have to help kind of bridge the gap between the two because, it's Jeff's right. I mean, all these things are different. Like, you're going to be in a different kind of playing environment than you're used to. You are accepting some risk of going back to play. You're going to be away from home for at least a while. It looks like that amount of time is going to be reduced. It's not easy. None of this is easy, and they have to work together. If they can't work together, as we're seeing in Major League Baseball, you can't get back on the field, period. He said about when the league could restart, at this point, with the amount of uncertainty out there, dates mean nothing. I think there will probably be decisions coming soon. So I would agree with that. I think you're closer rather than farther away from getting a deal done. And it sounds like even with some of the back and forth that seems to be the reality at this point.
Yeah, and you just want them to continue to both sides understand where the other's coming from, work toward a solution. Don't rush into a solution. Do what's best for both sides. Get out there and get a season underway in whatever form it takes.
Let's talk a little bit about John Wall Street's post this morning about limited fans in the NFL. The conversation's all over the place with American football. You've got Greg McGarity at the University of Georgia saying that they're planning on full attendance. You've got the Miami Dolphins. You've got Ohio State. You've got others talking about limited attendance. You've got others talking about no attendance. Everybody is all over the place. This is from John Wall Street, another great resource for the business side of the game. The NFL hasn't issued any guidelines yet. Troy Vincent said that the league is still planning on playing in full stadiums. Okay. Some teams have started to prepare for that possibility that they'll be playing in front of less than capacity crowds. The Jets early this month announced that they were delaying the sale of individual game tickets until they knew what it would look like. The Steelers, like you mentioned yesterday, holding back 50% of individual game ticket inventory because of possible social distancing scenarios. This might not be a league-wide thing. This might be some markets can only allow certain numbers, some can allow everybody, some will allow nobody. It's going to be very hard for that to be the case. Game day revenues, according to John Wall Street, in the NFL, 30 to 40% of overall club revenue. That's pretty consistent with what we've seen in other places. This could be a huge problem if you have that scenario where some teams can have full capacity, some teams can have no capacity. It's going to really affect the bottom line. John Wall Street suggests that the league could take a lowest common denominator approach, as they've done with mini camps, and declare that if stadium capacity is reduced for one, then the rest of the teams have to do the same. So whatever the most restrictive situation would be, then everybody has to do that. The league is considering that, according to John Wall Street sources that have spoken with him. That seems the most fair way to deal with it. You're going to have a huge outcry if that's the case. You're going to have massive outcry if that's the case. But that does seem to be fair. It says, in the event that games are played in front of smaller crowds, look for teams to break up their 10-game slate in an attempt to try and appease as many season ticket holders as possible.
Yeah.
The team president they spoke to said the club would create a bunch of different mini and partial plans for fans to choose from, and then credit or refund the unused dollars for the games that the season ticket holder didn't have access to. It's going to be tough. I mean, all that's going to be tricky, and that's one that I'm really looking at in how the NFL handles this, because they're going to push as hard as possible to have as many people in the venue as possible. College football will, in some places, take cues from that. In others, college football is just going to do what they're going to do. And college football is going to be all over the place because each conference will make its own decision. Each school will make its own decision. You've got the potential for some conferences to not have every school play this year because they might not be able to. Michigan has still said, their president said, if there's no students on campus, we're not playing intercollegiate sports. And if we don't have students on campus in the spring or in the fall, we're not having them on in the spring. There's no point in doing one or the other, which maybe is a little bit of an early assumption. But there's been some talk, and I think it's waned a little bit lately, that you could have college football seasons in the spring of 21.
Yeah.
And some smaller conferences are leaning that way because they're not going to be able to fund playing behind closed doors or limited capacity, so they might have to wait till you can have full capacity. It's going to be bonkers, and there will be crossover effects. It will affect decisions MLS makes because the perception situation. It will affect what Major League Baseball does. Major League Baseball, let me see if I've got this right.
Okay.
Back in March, and this is, I don't think either side's really arguing it. They're arguing, I think, maybe the strength of the agreement. But in March, they agreed basically to a prorated salaries. If they play X number of games, your salary would be paid out. That was going to be for the whole season on a prorated basis, depending on how many games you play. The players felt like that was binding. The league feels like that wasn't binding. That was a first negotiation, basically. And now the league is coming back with wanting more cuts on top of that. The players are pushing back on that. The players are saying they're not going to come off of that at all. And the players want more games than the league is proposing. The league's proposing basically a half schedule. And the players want more. If they're on a prorated basis, obviously they would want to play more games. They make more money. Is that basically where it is at this point?
Yeah. CBS Sports, back in March, players agreed to prorate the salaries based on based on number of games played. Salary cut, roughly 50%. MLBPA was of the position that compensation was put to rest with that agreement. Owners interpreted the agreement as allowing them to open negotiations in the event fans would not be allowed to attend games for some or all of the season. And so now that's why they're all in talks. Owners floated a 50-50 revenue split. Players objected to that. Players then float the idea of deferring part of the salaries due. Owners proposed salary reductions, hitting the highest paid players the hardest. And we saw the numbers yesterday where a guy like Max Scherzer would basically have an 85% salary reduction. He'd make a little under $6 million as opposed to $35 million. Then players, they want to defer. Owners propose reductions, and so the union takes umbrage with that, and that's where we are. So, yeah.
So baseball looks to be the farthest away from coming back. MLS could be the next one with an announcement ahead of the NBA. I think either way, MLS will be back on the field before the NBA or the NHL. YouTube of 35 has a really good question on Twitch, and you're probably a little more up on this in the college sports realm than I am. He says, touching on the, in parentheses, lack of testing in the college leagues when returning, since the COVID test isn't explicitly a sport-specific piece of training/game equipment, would the schools have to ensure the ability to provide the same level of testing to the rest of the student body? Would the extra testing be an impermissible benefit at that point as a free or reduced cost service not available to the university's general student body? Could you make it sport specific?
I think that you probably would have the NCAA waive the whole idea of an impermissible benefit because of the idea, and I'm trying to process this through as we're thinking about it, because...
Don't give yourself a headache.
No, I know. No, that's why we have the original Mountain Dew this morning and not the Mountain Lightning. I'm thinking that the NCAA would probably waive that idea as an impermissible benefit because of the situation that we're in.
I think they have to. Here's my question, though.
Yeah.
Okay, because of the amount of testing you're talking about,
right,
the cost you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, you want to get your football team back playing because it's your moneymaker. You got to have them playing. I understand that.
Yep.
And you've got to commit to a certain level of testing. Would the NCAA be okay? Because I would imagine that some schools would come back and say, well, we have the amount of money for testing for football, but we can't afford for testing for the soccer teams, or we can't afford testing for the softball team this fall, or whatever other sports go on in the fall.
Yeah.
That's maybe more of the issue that I see rather than the student body part. I think the NCAA will work around it. Now, could you have students on campus, and it goes back to Michigan's situation with, our schools, and some schools I think are going to do it, are schools going to have intercollegiate sports if they don't have students on campus?
Oh, I would
Michigan
imagine
has said
so.
no. Some
Yeah,
will.
I would. Yeah, no doubt.
Some don't care.
No, some don't care.
I think, have really created their fall schedule for classes based around being able to maximize the ability to have a football team.
Notre Dame is already working their way back to being on campus.
Who is?
Notre Dame.
Okay. It's going to be complicated, but that's my question is, okay, if you're going to have football, 100 and whatever amount of tests you're going to have twice a week to do it right.
Yeah, right.
I hope the NCAA doesn't allow programs to skimp on that. The SEC plan that was announced enraged me following all this as much as we have, because there is no consideration for safety and preventing spread in what was initially presented. Now, it was not finalized on the testing procedure, so they do have time to sort that out. They better. But if you're going to do 2 tests a week, which I think we've pretty well established is the baseline. You can do more, it's going to cost you more, but 2 per week is kind of your minimum amount to ensure the maximum amount of safety with 2 tests per week. Okay. Mm-hmm. Are you going to have programs schools say that, well, we can do this for football, and that's where the revenue comes from. We can't have a softball season this year. We can't have a soccer season this year. Or those programs, and I think this is already being talked about, are going to have to not play, not travel for non-conference games, only play a conference schedule, play a reduced conference tournament schedule, and minimize all costs possible. Are you going to see that happen to fund the testing available for football? I think you're already seeing some moves made in that direction.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see the non-revenue or the negative revenue sports be, and I don't want to use the word fall guy or victim here, but I think that you're going to see the cuts in one area to help testing on the whole. And I think that the sacrifices in scheduling and scholarship availabilities and those things for incoming freshmen and players like that, and possible renewals, because remember, scholarships for athletics, they're 1-year renewables. Yeah. They're not like a 4 or 5 year thing. So don't be surprised if you see some scholarship reductions to meet budgets in loss of revenue sports, in non-revenue sports, those kinds of things. You'll probably see some kind of budget tweaking to hopefully help out to test the athletes that you have. And don't be surprised if you get creative scheduling, like the notion that we've seen in some of the smaller Division I conferences where there's talk of mergers and playing each other to cut down on costs and things like that. So you're going to have to be really creative here, especially when it comes to making sure that if your football program is what's going to be bringing in revenue for everything else on campus, to where you're not having to cut any more sports like we've already seen, and we talked about this week at Appalachian State, and we've seen at Alabama Huntsville and other places.
What did Alabama Huntsville cut?
They cut 2 other sports and their hockey program, the only Division I hockey program south of the Mason-Dixon line.
They'd been talking about cutting that for a while, right? That's not a new conversation.
Yeah, it's not a new conversation, okay. But there's once again, we talked about GoFundMes in places like Bowling Green, and that there is a GoFundMe right now for Alabama Huntsville to resurrect the hockey program, but the additional cutting of 2 other sports is what we're seeing with Alabama Huntsville. So this, I think, is only the first wave of that.
Oh, yeah. I don't even think
schools,
we're much into it.
We're just getting started. But I think that you're going to have to see schools be very creative when it comes to their conferences, their scheduling, how much outlay they're going to have, and how many programs they're going to have left around. Keep an eye on those group of 5 schools that we talk about in Division I. That's the first part for me.
Yeah, Turner with a good point on Twitch. I don't think you're going to see the major conferences play in the spring, but could you see the smaller ones do it? Possibly, because they have to wait until they could have fans in the stands. How much of a logistical nightmare would that be with all aspects of it? If you have some college football played in the fall and some played in the spring, if you have the crossover with baseball, with other sports in the spring, if basketball gets delayed to make sure you have fans in the stands, if it goes later, all kinds of different elements are factored into it. And Turner said, as a student worker, I'm curious how departments handle sports after students don't come back after Thanksgiving. Notre Dame is finishing their semester after Thanksgiving. He said we would usually have 4 to 6 events in the month of December at his D2 school. I remember that at UGA when you would have games during the break in basketball, and the one I'll always remember is when North Carolina came to Athens late December for a game in 97, I think. Might have been 98. It was during the winter break, but man, everybody came back to campus for that game. At least everybody who was tied into the basketball team, and it was when the basketball team was good, so it was exciting to go. And it was a game that went to overtime. That was a wild game, but yeah, it was weird. Like everybody met, it was like a noon tip off too. So everybody that I went with, and we had a big group that always went to the basketball games. It's like, all right, we're going to get back on campus at 9:00. We're going to leave whenever you have to leave to get back on campus, and all the craziness that went along with it. So I don't know. I don't know how colleges are going to handle all this, but they're going to do whatever is possible to make as much money with football because that funds it all. That funds everything. So it does drive it. And then when you start to cross it over to, pro soccer and all the things we're talking about, you've got so many aspects that in soccer in the United States that are going to be affected by other sports. Perception, what's right and wrong, what is allowed and what isn't. If college football is just 100%, going forward with whatever they go forward with, if it's reduced capacity, if it's full capacity, if it's some of all of the above, you're going to see pressure on Major League Baseball to match that. You're going to see pressure on MLS to match that. You're going to see pressure across the board, not understanding the costs that are different at each sport and different league and different situation. It's even more complicated here, I think, than it is in other countries where the soccer league sets the standard going forward. The Bundesliga, any other league that's going to come back in Germany, they're going to follow what the Bundesliga's done. Here, you're going to follow football, and I'm a little worried with what we're hearing some on football that there's just not much of a real consideration as to what effects you're going to have here. Now, they don't start till the fall, and it's hard to predict what things look like in the fall. But I don't feel like they are really taking this as seriously as some other sports, and that's concerning. Turner's very happy that Lander does not have a football program. He doesn't want to deal with that in the fall. I'm with you. And Lander has a really good soccer program. Badgermon is talking about Alabama Huntsville coming up to Madison during his freshman year at UW, and he said, I thought it was a joke until they almost beat us. Wisconsin won the D1 national championship that year. Rest in peace, Chargers hockey. UAH.
Yeah, no, they won the D2 championship, I want to say either back-to-back seasons or 2 out of a 3-year period before they went up to Division I. So they've been a force in NCAA hockey and that outlier, and tried to find a conference, and it took the longest time for the WCHA to sit there and say, yeah, okay, we'll bring you in. But, it sucks, and it's just the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is that it's going to affect, men's soccer, I think, in a big way. I really worry about it having a big effect on men's Division I soccer. I don't know if it affects Division II and Division III as much. I don't think they are quite as dependent on football because there's not a ton of revenue there for Division II and Division III football. Some programs potentially, but not much. So I think it's the D1, and I think it's that that group of 5, like you talk about, that whether it's App State, whether it's Cincinnati, programs like that are gonna really get hit by this and potentially not make it to the fall, and it's a scary thing. I mean, college soccer is in a weird place. It's not the primary development tool. I'm from a long-term perspective in terms of developing talent. Like, I'm more worried about the effects on USL. I'm more worried about the effects on like an NPSL, a USL League 2, than the college game, although it is interconnected. I think minor league baseball could have a catastrophic effect on developing major league talent because they need that time in the minors more than maybe any other sport. You're going to see knock-on effects from this. But college soccer is a big opportunity for soccer playing, youngsters, men and women, to get a college education and play soccer in college. And yeah, for the women, it's more of a development tool. For the men, it's a great spot for late bloomers who maybe, had a growth spurt when they get to college, maybe didn't have as much access to play at top levels before that, and they get to college and they get noticed and they go into the draft and they join an MLS team and they come out of nowhere to a degree. It's a small number, but it is there. At the USL levels, it's the larger number that come out of college and play. It will affect those things. More than anything, it's going to affect just the opportunities for kids to go to college based on soccer. And that's what we're kind of waiting to see.
Yep. A couple of other news and notes out of England before we go. Shanghai Shenhua is willing to let Odion Ighalo extend his Manchester United loan until January, as long as he signs a new 2-year deal with £400,000 a week to stay at the Chinese club till 2024.
You say that in a mocking tone. That's a good deal.
No, that's just the underlying aspect of it. It's like, you can stay, but you got to hang out with us for another couple of years.
Well, yeah. Well, no. You are incorrect. You don't have to hang out with them for another 2 years, but they have contract control. So if you're going to sell the player, then they're going to make money on it. But yeah, that's the trade-off. That's a valid trade-off. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and Shanghai Shenhua is looking out for their pocketbook. I completely
understand. They have to. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, we'll be the nice guy here. You can have the player for another few months, and we're not going to extend the deal." It's like, yeah, all right, player, you want to go over here and you want to extend your loan? That's cool. You're going to sign a longer deal with us. So if you do well, we can sell you and bring in money.
Yeah, we've talked about Newcastle United and sale, no sale, sale up in the air. They've apparently only recalled just 2 scouts to work, as a majority of the club's recruitment team remain on furlough so far.
It's still early. I mean, that could change here pretty quickly depending on what happens. We'll have to see. But I don't read too much into that just yet.
Now, let me ask you a question. Okay. We are fairly confident in the notion that the English pyramid is going to be different when we come out the other side. League One, League Two, I mean, you could have completely and totally different look. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Premier League teams are kicking the tires on the notion with the FA of perhaps putting their B teams, their under-23s, in, say, League Two. They're revisiting this proposal. Last time it was...
we're back to that? They flew off the handle about this last time when it was proposed.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care what Spain does. I don't care what these other leagues do. We're England. So now you're going to look at it, huh?
Mm-hmm. Last time it was apparently looked at was 2014, and so now they're just kind of kicking the tires on it.
Yeah, it's kicking tires. That's a bunch of nonsense. It works. It works. We've seen it in Spain. It works. We've seen it here in the United States with second teams. It works. Is it what you want your whole second division to be? No. I mean, reserve teams in the Premier League, do they actually do anything for you? No. You're playing games in empty stadiums. You're playing games with all kinds of weird restrictions. Nobody follows the league. There's no pressure on those players outside of individual performances. The best way for a player to develop is you go and you play meaningful matches, and if you're playing meaningful matches, you're not going to have the second team for the club get promoted beyond a certain level, and if you want to keep that really low, that's fine. If they can't get promoted beyond League One, beyond the third tier, that's fine. But create a platform for it. It's a better way to develop talent, and it's much better than what they're doing now. The reserve league system means nothing. Germany does it well. Spain does it well. The United States is doing it well. And if you want to anger the English and the Premier League and tell them that MLS and USL's partnership is doing better in developing talent that way than what they're doing with their reserve league that nobody knows anything about.
Conservative Member of Parliament Damian Collins has written a letter to the chair of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, Oliver Dowden, as well as EFL Chair Rick Perry, FA Chair Greg Clark, and he published it to his Twitter account, @Damian Collins, shockingly enough.
Yeah, that works.
A group of members of Parliament have called for urgent talks with the FA and EFL to address the financial impact of coronavirus. And it is the thought in the letter that there are only a few weeks to really discuss the financial crisis to get everybody in the same path so you don't have anything catastrophic happen to the game. He's suggesting a football finance authority to be created by the FA, backed financially by the government. Funds would help clubs meet short-term needs while they restructure their financial models. It would not be offered as loans, but would be exchanged for a minority shareholding of the club between 10 and 49%. In turn, an FFA-approved independent director would take a place on the board of the club itself. They'd have access to financial records of the club they're working with and would be expected to correspond with the FFA to ensure financial affairs are brought back in line.
He's going to have to figure something out. They need to do it soon because, it's just like we were saying about college football and the NFL here, where I feel like they're not necessarily looking at the big picture. The Premier League and Championship and all of that aren't necessarily looking at the big picture. For some, it's get back on the field right now. Let's get these TV deals sorted out. Let's move forward. Championship's got more concerns with the financials. League One, I don't know why they're wasting their time thinking they're going to play games. They're not going to be able to afford to do it. League Two finally made that decision. That's all great. You decided on what's going to happen right now. What happens for next season, 2020/21? Are you going to have money to sign players? Are you going to have money to not have to release players? Are you going to have money to have scouting departments? Barcelona's cutting their freaking scouting department. Are you going to have money to do things that you normally do during an off season? Well, you haven't had any money come in a while, so that's going to be difficult. If you don't have TV partners fund that money up front to make sure you're able to do it, then yeah, you're probably going to need a loan. And the government's going to have to support that. That's for clubs who are run well. I'm not even talking about clubs who have been run poorly, who have a ton of debt on top of this and are literally trying to keep the doors open right now and don't see a way to do it. Those clubs are absolutely going to need a bailout. This is going to happen. This is going to happen, and there's not a whole lot of plans to deal with it, really. This is at least something that they're talking about. I don't know if it's going to get done. We'll have to see. But I do not expect that all 90-something teams in the English pyramid will be back next year. I just don't see how that happens. When you already had one go under this year before all this, you had another one narrowly escape going under. How are they going to survive this? How's Bolton going to survive this? How are others going to survive this? I don't think the same number of teams come back. I just don't think there's any way that happens.
Daily Mail, Herbert and Jones, a previously unseen video of Emiliano Sala signing 3 Cardiff City forms. This is their wording, could lend support to Nantes, whose demand for a £15 million transfer fee have gone to the sport's highest court. The footage shows Sala being presented with 3 forms in quick succession, signing each of them 3 days before he died when a plane carrying him to Cardiff crashed. FIFA have already ruled Cardiff have to pay in full for the player or face a 3-window transfer embargo. Cardiff's appeal against the decision has gone to CAS. So
Cardiff was arguing that he wasn't their player yet. They were arguing that he wasn't registered with them yet, so he wasn't their player yet. So you also have had back-and-forth negotiations between the two clubs about a reduced transfer fee. That's probably going to end up being how this gets resolved. Yeah, it's a completely unfortunate and horrible thing that happened, but yeah, there are financial repercussions of it. Nantes sold the player and was expecting that money to come in, and they need that money now more than ever, and you didn't get the player. So, what's the obligation here? CAS will have a hand in it, but they should find a settlement before that, because I don't think it's fair that Nantes gets nothing.
Yep. And word out of the the EFL, Blackburn midfielder Elliot Bennett and 2 unnamed Fulham players have tested positive. Bennett says he is asymptomatic, feeling no ill effects. Blackburn have confirmed he will now self-isolate at home for the next 7 days, provided he develops no symptoms. Return to training with Rovers teammates on Friday, June 5th.
In Scotland, today,
Today,
the Scottish three-letter outlet that I don't like is saying now, because this is what they do, Peterhead boss Jim McAnally has branded Ann Budge a bully and urged clubs to boot out her league reconstruction plan. Because that's how you negotiate. You call people bullies. And the Peterhead manager, what level is Peterhead at, by the way? Could you
efforting
tell me that one? Because I don't know. And no, I do not want the Scottish three-letter to be sending me notifications. Let's block that quickly. All right. The Peterhead manager read her temporary 14-14-14 blueprint to save Hearts, Partick Thistle, and Stanrayer from relegation, and he thinks it's all caps nonsense. Great writing here. Okay. She's a bully. Okay. McAnally believes lower league clubs are being used as cannon fodder to save the Jambo's skin, with the likes of Cove Rangers denied going up a level and others risking mass relegations in future. Did I imagine that there was a part of the plan that had Cove Rangers and the other team from outside of the league going up? There was a 14-14-16 variant as well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What level is this club at?
Peterhead finished 8th in Scottish League 1, 2 positions above Stranraer.
So now we have a club that is 2 positions above the team that's getting relegated to the bottom tier in the current system, calling the head of a club that is getting relegated from the Premiership, Hearts, is a much bigger club than we're talking about here. Peterhead, they're a bully. Okay.
Bully.
Told the Press and Journal, I hope everyone involved will fight this because she's shown no regard for part-time football and part-time clubs. Hopefully we can make her pay the price for that. Who's the bully here? Jeez. Nobody wants Hearts to be relegated, but if it comes down to Hearts being relegated rather than Clyde, Peterhead, Forfar, or Stranraer, or Cove being denied promotion, then we need to fight and show she can't come and bully us. What is he talking about, by the way?
No idea.
Those clubs could be relegated later under this plan, under a different plan, under the current system, under any system, because they might stink later and get relegated. Mm-hmm. Like, are there going to be more relegation spots if they go away from this? Maybe. This is a temporary plan to figure out a better plan later. Like, this is not rocket science. This is not rocket science. It shows a total disregard for other clubs. No, that's just ridiculous. I know she'll come out and say we're still in the same league because there will only be 3 leagues and it will still be League One. But no matter what way she wants to look at it, it's still a relegation. So he's saying that because they would be combining leagues, that it would be a relegation. He's off his rocker.
Yeah, no.
He's absolutely off his rocker. What does it matter if it's League One in a 4-tier system or League One in a 3-tier system when you're still playing at the same level? You're not getting relegated. Are you mad now because you're in the lowest tier? Well,
I think so.
You were in a pseudo low tier to begin with. And you were 3 spots off getting relegated anyway. You don't need 4 divisions in Scotland. It's madness. Combine it and move forward. And beyond that, if you've got a better idea, why don't you come up with it instead of calling people a bully?
Okay, well, Peterhead manager Jim McAnally.
No, he's just a dummy. No, he's not a twit of the day. He's just a dummy. He doesn't even get that level of consideration.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you don't.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, you
what? It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't, because
nope.
You're going to have these teams, as McAnally said. We've been realistic in saying behind closed doors and playing with all the testing required isn't on. She's jumped on it to totally disregard everyone except the elite clubs in Scotland. There are other solutions available besides mothballing. There's no... What? This is stupid. People need to act like adults. Like,
if clubs continue to look for things and not concentrate on what can be achieved by working together, then starting Leagues 1 and 2 will be delayed for a long time.
Yeah.
However, We all agree that playing in front of fans, playing each other 3 times, and possibly having a 6-4 split, it could come back in a few months. Obstacles will be overcome easier if we're all pushing in the one direction.
Look, you're not going to be able to create a plan based off the fact that you could have a virus outbreak in a few months. You create a plan that has buffers, and you create a plan that has a system, but you can't just say, well, we can't do anything. You can't afford to play games right now if you're these lower division teams in Scotland. The Premiership's not affording to play games right now. So how could a third division team or a fourth division team, or if they're a third division team under one format and a fourth division team under another, or a third division team under one and still a third division team, but it's an insulting third division team because it's the lowest tier, doesn't matter. You're not being able to afford to play games right now no matter what system you're on. Period. It's not happening. So you probably need to figure out a way to work it out because, hey, here's the deal, McAnally. This is what's going to happen if you don't. You've got what right now in the League One currently? 10 teams?
Yes.
So let me make sure I got this right. It is 10 teams in the bottom tier. Is it 10 teams in every tier? Where are the extra 2? Are they in the top? Is it 12 in the Premiership?
Efforting. I want to get this right.
Yeah.
12 in the Premiership.
Okay. 12, 10, 10, 10.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a 10-team league. What are the odds that all 10 teams are able to come back when you're able to come back? Low.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 14-team league or a 16-team league if you allow that promotion that you're really trying to use as a crutch. What are the odds you end up with a 10-team league? Probably pretty realistic. If you have a 10-team league and you end up with 4 or 5 or 6, you're screwed. If you have a 16-team league or a 14-team league and you end up with 8 or 10, okay, you're back to where you were. So you can yell and stomp your feet and call people bullies. I'd like to know if he would have called Dave Cormack a bully, or if he would have called Celtics leadership a bully, or Rangers leadership a bully. I'm assuming he would not have. But he calls Ann Budge a bully, and Ann Budge is absolutely looking out for Hearts. But her plan did, in my opinion, consider the rest of the league and made sense. So we will see. And it was the temporary thing anyway. And it was, the idea was to be for 2 years and then figure it out. I think people have jumped on this like it'd be 2 years and then you'd go back to 4 divisions. And Scottish football is not going to be the same in 2 years. It's probably going to be better to have 3 divisions anyway. There's no point in having 4. It's just bonkers. So let's, instead of actually trying to figure out a plan, let's start calling people names because we're in 2nd grade.
And you were 30th. You were 30th in a 42-team ladder.
Yes. So let's follow everything that you're saying because you obviously know how to run a club.
That'd be a big old nope.
Man, good job, Scotland. We will see what Scotland does. I'm sure they'll fight about it. I think their reconstruction discussions are ongoing. I don't know if they actually have a meeting set or if they're just going to call each other names on WhatsApp and Zoom. We'll see.
Check your spam folder.
Yeah, that too. Hearts have rejected a formal takeover approach from the son of former Liverpool owner George Gillett. That is from the BBC. Interesting.
It's the Molson family, isn't it?
Yes.
I think
that was the pre-Fenway Liverpool ownership group, right?
Yep.
He was part of it. All right. We will get into all of these things going forward because there's going to be a bunch of them tomorrow. The Premier League is still meeting in their 8-hour-plus meeting. We'll see if they get any kind of consensus about rebates to broadcast partners. We have the basics of when they're going to come back. We don't know much else about the schedule. I'm sure a bunch of that's going to come today. We'll have plenty to talk about on tomorrow's show. 9 o'clock in the morning. You can download it later through Spreaker, through your podcatchers. You can listen to it live on our app, on our website. You can watch it live on twitch.tv/soccer down here. All that stuff's coming tomorrow. Plenty to talk about then. Mucho platió.
Mucho platió.